Hello, everyone. Pastor George here with today's Bible study recap. Today in Bible study, we looked at the Gospel of Matthew, chapter 28, verses 16 through 20. This is the passage known as the Great Commission, a favorite of mine, a favorite of many people. And I wanted to look at this one in relation to what JT talked about on Sunday when he was preaching for us, specifically what it means, to really think about our mission to the world and to bring the gospel to other people, right? A very important thing for us. And this is one of the texts that is the kind of seminal, most important text. And it's only a few verses. It's 4 verses, right? But it's so interesting because you could almost say that the entire Gospel of Matthew, all the important themes are found here. So again, right? Context, this is after the resurrection. The disciples have gone to Galilee as Jesus has instructed them to do. And it's so important that you notice just the small things that maybe you wouldn't even think of. But when you know Matthew's gospel, you see how important this type of stuff is. So for instance, right, Jesus tells them to go to the mountain, right? And Matthew has a lot of focus on mountains in his, right? You have the transfiguration, and granted, that's also present in the other gospels. But one of the things you have in Matthew that you don't have in the other gospels is the Sermon on the Mount. Luke has something very similar, the Sermon on the Plain. But what is the difference? Well, this seems to be a sermon that Jesus probably gave in a few different places. But Matthew wants to make clear that he's giving it on a mountain. And of course, there aren't mountains in the sense of maybe that we would expect in the United States, like a Rocky Mountain. No, right? Nothing like that. But it should call to mind something for you. It should call to mind the mountain, right? And could be Mount Sinai or Mount Zion. I'm not saying that this is the mountain they went to, but it should call that to your mind. You should think Old Testament, right? Oh, God speaks from the mountain, right? So when Jesus is giving his Sermon on the Mount, he's giving them law. He is speaking law to them from a mountain, just as God did in Sinai, right? How cool is that, right? So it's important that you see the mountain here. It's not, Matthew could have gave us something else, right? If it happened somewhere else, but he really wants to highlight the fact that this happened on a mountain. So remember that. And then it says they went there and they found him there. They saw him and they worshiped him just as the people of Israel worshiped God at Mount Sinai, right? And then it says, but some doubted. Now that isn't the sense of doubting and not believing. The Greek there is a little bit more about hesitation or fear almost, right? They're worried about what might happen next, the call that this has on their lives, and how much can that mean for us, right? I mean, we face this too, maybe not as much as them, but certainly the things that will happen in response to following Jesus, what that means for your life, makes it difficult. And so we are reminded here that the apostles felt the same way. Very important. But what does Jesus say to them, right? Even though they're worried, he tells them that all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. So this gets to the big themes of the Gospel of Matthew. So firstly, Matthew is a very Jewish-centered book. So of course, all of the New Testament is Jewish. It's a Jewish book, right? But this one is particularly focused. The Gospel of Matthew is particularly focused on presenting the message of Jesus to Jewish people. And so Matthew uses a lot more idioms. He uses a lot more terminology. He likes to focus more of the Old Testament than our other gospel writers. And you can see this all over the place, right? Again, the fact that he chose a mountain to highlight is showing that this is an important aspect to Jesus' ministry to him, that he wants them to understand. It might not mean anything to Gentiles, but to the Jewish audience, it would. It would remind them of Sinai and the other mountains in the Old Testament where God spoke down out of, right? So he says, and that's one major theme. Then you have Jesus as the Messiah, of course, always a major theme. Jesus as King. So you see Jesus as God, Jesus as Messiah, Jesus as King. This is present here. He's fulfilling the messianic prophecies. He's reigning as a king. He has all authority of heaven and earth, and he's God. He's being worshipped and, of course, has the authority, right? And as you're going to see, he equates himself as a person of the Godhead along with the Holy Spirit in just one more verse, right? So He says, I have all the authority on heaven and earth. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. And this is the ta ethne. So this is the Gentiles, right? This is ethne is the Hebrew word. It's where we get Greek word. It's where we get ethnicity from, and this is a specific reference to the Gentiles. And he tells them to baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. Bring them into our community. This is the fulfillment of the messianic prophecies, the fulfillment of the visions of the prophets that we have in the Old Testament of everyone coming to Mount Zion to worship the Lord, right? And then he says, teach them to observe all that I have commanded you. Again, right, like a lawgiver, right? God gives the law on Sinai, and the people are to follow it, right? They're to obey it and observe it the same way, right? So Christians, the ethne, the nations who are brought in, observe the teachings of the law and of Jesus, right? And then he ends by saying, behold, I am with you always to the end of the age, so until he comes again. In those 4 verses, there's a lot to unpack. I think one of the interesting things, if you really want to see the similarities, and I'm not saying that they're word for word the same, but look at the first 6 verses of Exodus 19, and you'll see the parallelism between this and that, right? And between that and the Sermon on the Mount. It's when Israel makes it to Sinai. And you're going to see that Matthew is, in his presentation of this, accurately reflecting what Jesus did in the Gospels, right? That this happened, but presenting it in a way and in language that people of Jewish descent who know the Old Testament are going to get exactly what Jesus is saying, right? Jesus is claiming to be Yahweh, the lawgiver, who has now fulfilled the messianic prophecies and is beginning the beautiful vision of the prophets by bringing in the people of all the nations of the Gentiles to worship him. And this is the act of us and the disciples, right? Despite the fact that they are worried about it or maybe hesitant, right? This is still what they have to do, and Jesus is bolstering them, right? That's why you have, and behold, very Hebrew idiom, behold, I am with you always. So even though you're scared, I'm with you. So it calls us in our own lives to bring this message to the people around us, to bring it here in Edison, to use whatever means we have to bring it to people around the world. And so that's what we talked about today. I hope you found that interesting. I'll see you tomorrow for an episode of A New Thing, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your Wednesday. Peace out.